Hey friends, this is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com. I apologize that today's video is a little later than I usually do, but I didn't have a pre-recorded video to release today because I put one in the descriptive area of another one, so it made one less. And I spent the morning with my brother, so it's pouring rain. I came home, I put on a moo-moo, and it's going to be a tarot and moo-moo day. I wanted to revisit two videos or two readings that I did. One, so it won't be long. It's not going to be a redo. It's just I want to reevaluate. And I've said it before, and I've done it many times. When I do readings on a situation, I really do like to follow up and scrutinize the reading to see what I might have missed, right? Because we don't always get the interpretation. How I see it is food for thought, things to consider. But at the same time, things could be seen or interpreted more than one way. And sometimes maybe they should have been interpreted a different way, and that's why I do it. It's a learning thing. It's how I learn, and I'm just sharing that information with you. I think it's a good idea to do, At any rate, the first one was called Protest Parade and the Pope. It was that reading. And I used the beautiful Metelli by Marco Benedetti. And I had to use a few extra cards because in the signature spread that I developed, and if you use it, feel free, but give me credit, please. I appreciate that. Two of the cards were repeated, and so I just happened to have a mini Metelli that was gifted to me by Shell David from East Tarot. So let's flip the camera and take a look. Okay, the things that the way the reading spoke to me was that this bottom row would be, whose camp. I had thought that it was probably referencing the parade because that was the question I had. The second row, since another question was regarding the Pope, and the overall spread ended with the Pope, which meant that was the gist for the whole spread, or maybe a most important feature of the entire spread, but it also applied to this row. So I saw this row as the turnout for the Pope, either in person or on the, TV or the podcast or the broadcast or however it was viewed by the world. And then the top row I saw as the protesters. Now, the protesters line looked great. It said, wow, we get our message out. It really looked promising. And people turned out. And the last I heard was, I believe there was 10 to 11 million estimated protesters. And I posted it on my, sometimes I post things on my YouTube channel. If you want to go to my website, if you want to go to my YouTube channel and then just look under posts, you'll see. Optimistically, they said there was 20,000 people that attended his parade. But I don't see how that's possible. It looked like it was more desolate than any other Saturday or Sunday that I've ever been to Washington, D.C. on the weekend. So there's that. There's probably more realistic to like a few thousand people that showed up. And we don't know how many of them were paid because he put an ad in his little whatever it is, his newspaper that, his right-wing conservative newspaper, that he would pay for seat fillers, $1,000 in crypto coin, which basically, of course, is worthless. And, that kind of thing. So we don't even know how many of them were paid, The second row, now the Pope, I think, had like 5 million viewers, which he filled the stadium. So however many people filled this, to capacity, the stadium in Chicago. And then an additional amount of people, that watched his message broadcast. And for some reason, his, even though there were more, I took it to be that there would be more people tuned into the Pope. But in reality, there was more people tuned in or participating in the protests. But I think that, we should not undervalue or underestimate the Pope's presence, that he did that on that day, because that was a form of protest. We must not overlook that. And I think he's really trying. I think he's making an effort to save his own flock in the United States. The people who claim that they're, Catholics. I think, I had said that, the Wheel of Fortune here, and that from what I felt, that he was trying to redirect the dialogue in their hearts, he was trying to redirect them. And I think that's true. And I think he'll continue to do that. And I don't think we should underestimate, even though 10 or 11 million people might have showed up for the protests, and maybe half that showed up, to tune in to the Pope. I don't think we should underestimate what he's trying to do in his contribution. So I don't think maybe we should keep an eye on him. Now, this I thought was his parade, but as it turns out, there was nobody there, and there was no violence at his parade. And I feel really bad for the Army, because it was their 250th birthday. And, what he wanted to see the goose stepping that, he sees in other countries. And that's not what our country's about. That's not what our armed forces are never, hopefully, and I'm so glad to see it, are not going to goose step. They're not going to goose step. And you know what? It's sad that he put our, military on display like that. It kind of looked like their hearts weren't into it. They were showing up because he said they had to, and he's their boss, and, but they didn't, you could tell their hearts weren't in it. So universe bless the United States Army. And although there were some, I'm sure, that were, dedicated to him, it seemed apparent that the majority were not. So what was this then? Well, this I guess this must have been, I don't want to say his name, but I think his initials are VB, and what he did in Minnesota. He's from that camp. He's from their camp. What he did was politically motivated. It's BS that his camp is saying that it was done by Democrats who are unhappy with their political BS. So I think that this definitely shows that this was what came from his camp, because one of the categories was his parade or his camp. I see this, as somebody, I saw it as a violent individual, and with catastrophic events, something catastrophic. The two families, the Hortmans and the Hoffmans. The Mrs. Hortman's, what was her? Both her and her husband's name begin with an M. I can't recall what her first name was. His name was Mark. She was killed. She was a representative. They were both killed, and then the Hoffmans were both seriously injured. But the fool came in. The fool rushed in, did his business, did his violent thing, and I'm so glad he was apprehended. And the next reading I want to take a look at was on that topic, as a matter of fact. So let me pick these up, and we'll revisit what I got right, what I got wrong. Alrighty, and here's the second spread. I think you saw it yesterday, and it was called the Minnesota Incident. I call it like that because I don't like to say, I don't like to use violent words, and I don't like to use people's names, especially if they're wicked, because it gives power to them. But jump to, if you want to review it to see what I said, skip to the 9-minute, 10-second point, because that's when I actually do the video, when I actually do the spread. And the deck used is the Marseille at Night by Printagrams. It's available on Etsy. Now, the question was, where might the culprit, the perpetrator, who they know who it was, where might he be found? Under what conditions and circumstances? Here, I started here. Quickly I said he'd be brought to justice, and it would bring the end of his, the end of what he did. It either would mean the end of him, or that it would be just that they would end it. And I said relatively quickly. I got a sense of urgency with this row. So I got that stuff right. What I didn't get right in this row is I perceived this as 8. I don't know why. My brain just said it was 8. And I added it up as 8. And I saw this as the death card, because that's what the quint card would have been had it been an 8. And I've just perceived it as it coming to a conclusion, which relatively quickly, which actually is what happened. So it just goes to show, like, how you perceive a message is what you're receiving. Okay. So one of you was, maybe more than a few, but one like called me out on it and said, actually, that would have been the temperance card. So, because I did add it wrong. Okay. So let's look at it if it was temperance. Well, temperance doesn't have that much of a different message in the context of this question, because if I see it as detoxification, which if I said it once with temperance, I've said it a million times, right? A detoxification, it's like neutralizing him. So it didn't show, it might not have been as abrupt as his end, as in, the death card, or a shootout or anything like that, but clearly it was detoxified and neutralized quickly. It could also have suggested a body of water, which initially, when I saw this, my first thought was, maybe it's near a large body of water. Now, I've never been to, the name of his town is some kind of, the place where he was found. Oh, I wish I had written it down. I forgot to check to remind myself, but it was some like Isle, right? So, and one of you, thank you very much, when you have inside information, thank you very much for giving it to me, said that there is a lake, a large lake, and it's an isle, so it's surrounded by water. So it's not crazy I guess I got that right. This one I saw as like a possible, because I saw the world card as manifestation. And I mentioned in the reading that I did that what was found in his car wasn't a manifesto. It was just his list of people that were on his to-do list. And then I suggested, well, then maybe he has a manifesto, or maybe they'll find a manifesto, or maybe he was actually writing it right then and there. Now, I saw this as him, obviously, because we have the Knight of Swords, right? We have the Knight of Swords taking off, and then he has another car. Now, the interesting thing is, and that I also got right, was that it looked like, even though they found his original car, he got a second car, and I didn't know who gave him the car, if it was a family member that gave him a car, or if he just stole a car. It was a car of opportunity. He just took it. So I did get that right also, that he took off in another car, that he had a car. And then aside from the urgency of reading this line as urgency, because we have batons and we have swords, and to me that's very quick. The death card, as I perceived it, was very quick, right? And then justice. So I saw that as coming to pretty quick, So I think he was caught within 2 days. And the car also led me to believe that it would be really quick, as did the Wheel of Fortune, So I think I got that right. And then temperance could have been also another nod to a body of water, being surrounded by water. So either way, I don't really think I should, either the message came as it came, right? But even if I had perceived it this way, my conclusions, basically, I think my conclusions would have been the same. It's interesting how tarot does, you read things in the context of the question. That's how I've learned through the years, the way the message is perceived. If you perceive that as the 8 and you get the death card, that's the message. And then as it turns out, sometimes it's really not that far off the mark if you go back later and recalculating. Now, here's the row that I didn't get right, as far as I know. Again, we have, a sense of maybe a large body of water, near water. I think that, and especially now if it was temperance, the large body of water, I think rings true. We could even see the world card as the shape of something, I think it's a stretch. I think it might be a stretch. I didn't perceive it this way. But you could see it as a shape of a body of water. It's a body, and it's next to water. So maybe those two things could have meant body of water. That's where he escaped to. I don't know. I don't really know. Maybe he has, a manifesto somewhere that we just aren't aware of. Or he had, I'm not sure. But that's a possibility. So then I thought, a body of water near a place where there might be children. Now, at the time, I didn't know if he had children. And at the time, obviously, I didn't know that he was hiding close to his home. He has 5 kids. Now, I described this as because they were the suit of swords and the suit of coins for the kids, it made me think of school. It made me think of a place where children learn, because this is like intellect, and this could be seen as intellect, and this could be seen as, education. So I don't know, maybe the kids are homeschooled. I think that's a stretch to say he'll be found near homeschooled kids, I don't know. But I think it is interesting that 2 children were represented. I don't know. I mean, I don't know the area well enough. It would take probably a local person to say, gosh, Marilyn, no kidding. He was found like a mile or, in the region of a schoolhouse, who knows? That information hasn't come to me, so I don't really know. I also suggested that maybe there could have been some kind of water wheel somewhere. We have a beginning of a 10 and it ends with a 10. And so, it kind of looks like a water wheel to me, in the proximity of a place where there's children. It could have been his home. I don't see women per se. I mean, I don't see that his wife was involved, although there's reports that she was questioned. I don't know if she was arrested. I don't know if she was detained, but she was at least questioned in a vehicle with other family members. I don't, the rumor, I don't know if it's truth. They said she had a passport. Maybe she was taken care of. Maybe they were in touch with one another, but I don't see her figuring into this. I don't see her in this spread. So he may have been given help by her, but I don't. I guess that wasn't what I asked, because I asked under what conditions or where he might be found and under what circumstances. And I guess the read did that, if we can verify if there was a school or a water wheel or I think it's clear that there were lakes, and that if it's an isle, if he was found on an isle, ISLE, then that suggests it's surrounded by water, so it's not so far from the mark. But it's crazy that he was close to home. He wasn't that far from his home, which is kind of weird. You would think if he had a vehicle and, he would have taken off. But I guess he didn't have it all planned out, So anyway, I just thought it was interesting to revisit them. It'll be interesting to know if anything came out of this. I won't revisit the spread again, except to mention it in passing in another video. I have a few things that you might like that are coming up. One of my subscribers, Sharon, was gracious enough to contact me through email. Said, I know you're on a moratorium, and I have a few decks that I'm giving up, and I'd like you to have one. Isn't that awesome? So she listed a few. I think the first 2 I had numerous copies of, so I felt like, well, I don't have that particular copy. Maybe one I had a copy. One I already did. I already had one that she was offering by the same publisher. Another one, I didn't have that particular publication, but I already had like 5, of different publications. So I figured, and then the third one I never even heard of. So I was like, that's the one I want, the one I never heard of. So we'll be doing that probably tomorrow's video, because I found out from the mail service of my phone that it'll be arriving today. So that's awesome. So thank you, Sharon, and look forward to it, folks, to see a mystery deck coming in. I know what it is, but of course I'm going to leave it as a mystery deck for you guys. Until next time, friends, peace, stay well, and continue to be brave. We're making a difference. Oh, one of the questions I asked too, I think, was, will all of this make a difference? Will the protests have made a difference? That was another question that I had in the original question, where I asked the Pope, the video that was called Protest Parade and the Pope. One of the questions was, overall, will the protests make a difference? And they definitely are making a dent. We feel empowered. We feel empowered. And then the Pope having his message, let's not underestimate his message. I mean, I'm not Catholic, but let's not underestimate his contribution, because he may just reach some of them that pretend to be Catholics, and he's reminding them, maybe not a good idea to sell your soul to the devil. He didn't say that. That's me. Bye-bye.